The council chamber of the Galactic Empire shimmered with the light of 1,000 stars, each projected above the assembly like jewels suspended in the void. Representatives of dozens of conquered worlds filled the tiers, their voices hushed, their attention drawn to the lone figure standing in the center. He was not human, nor of the dominant imperial species, but an old general whose campaigns stretched back centuries. His armor bore scars that no restoration could erase, and his eyes carried the weight of countless wars. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady, commanding silence not through force but through the gravity of experience. "You may marshal your fleets," he began, his gaze sweeping across the gathered lords and commanders. "You may command your armies to march in every corner of the spiral, but there is one order I will not support. Do not attempt to drag humanity into this war. Do not compel them to choose sides." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some scoffed openly, while others leaned forward in curiosity. The general ignored them. He had seen too many assemblies like this, filled with leaders who mistook arrogance for wisdom. "I have fought 1,000 battles against 100 enemies," he continued. "I have studied every species that raised its flag against us, from the insected swarms of the Outer Rim to the crystalline fleets of Vera. I know their strengths, their weaknesses, their patterns of thought. They fight as their natures dictate, and thus they can be defeated. But humanity—" his pause was deliberate, heavy. "Humanity does not fight as others do. Humanity defies prediction." An elder of the council scoffed. "Humans? That primitive species? Their weapons are centuries behind our own. Their fleets are untested. Their colonies barely hold together. What do you fear in them, old soldier?" The general met the elder's eyes without flinching. "I do not fear their weapons. I fear their will. You look upon their technology, and you see weakness. I look upon their history, and I see danger." The chamber quieted again. He raised one clawed hand toward the star map. Earth glowed faintly among the countless suns, small, unassuming, almost invisible beside the empires that surrounded it. "They have torn themselves apart more times than we can count," he said, voice deepening. "Before they reached the stars, they waged wars that should have extinguished them. No sane species survives fire on that scale. Entire continents scarred, generations slaughtered, and yet they endured. Where another race would have collapsed into ruin, they rebuilt. Where most would have learned only despair, they learned adaptation. They mastered conflict as though it were a forge, hammering themselves into something stronger every time." The council shifted uneasily. A few of the younger strategists frowned, sensing the undertone in his words. The elder waved a dismissive hand. "So they are resilient. So they squabble. What of it? We have subdued stronger foes." The general's voice dropped lower. "You mistake endurance for stubbornness. It is not the same. Humans do not merely endure, they transform. Every hardship is fuel for them. Every defeat a lesson. Every attempt to break them only sharpens their edge. They are not the most powerful, nor the most numerous, nor the most advanced. But if you provoke them, they will refuse to yield. And once they refuse, you cannot win. You may destroy their fleets, shatter their worlds, slaughter their kin, but it will only ignite their resolve. They will bleed you until the galaxy itself becomes ash, and still they will stand." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. For a moment, even the proudest lords could not find words. The general let them sit in it, then continued with the finality of a man delivering a sentence. "If you wish to conquer the galaxy, do so without them. If you wish to end this war swiftly, leave them to their neutrality. But if you force humanity's hand, you will curse every banner you fly. Because when they rise, they will not stop. Not until your empire is rubble, and your names are forgotten." A younger counselor rose, face twisted with disdain. "Are we to be held hostage by a backwater world because you are haunted by legends? Humanity is nothing. They are children who stumbled into the void." The general inclined his head slightly, not in agreement, but in pity. "Children they may seem. But even a child can wield fire. And humanity has carried fire longer than most civilizations have existed." He straightened, folding his arms behind his back. Mark my words, the safest war is the one they do not fight. Do not invite them into ours. Because if they enter, this war will no longer be ours at all. It will become theirs. And they will decide how it ends. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the chamber erupted with laughter, dismissals, and scorn. The general did not argue further. He had spoken the truth. Whether they listened or not, the stars themselves would reveal the cost. Humans were not born into an easy galaxy. Long before their first fragile machines clawed into orbit, their own planet had tested them in ways few civilizations could comprehend. Ice ages drove them to adapt or die. Plague sighed through their populations, forcing medicine, cooperation, and desperate ingenuity. Volcanoes, earthquakes, and storms taught them the futility of believing in permanence. From their first steps as a species, they were forged in uncertainty, taught that survival required change, and that change demanded both courage and ruthlessness. Unlike most intelligent species, they did not emerge in a single cradle of peace or stability. Their world was fragmented into countless tribes, cultures, and languages. Where another race might have unified early, they grew through conflict. Competition defined them. For every discovery, another people sought to take it. For every empire that rose, another sought to bring it down. They learned to fight, not as a single mind, but as a multitude, and that paradox became their strength. The human story was not one of straight lines, but of a million paths converging, clashing, and breaking apart, only to reform stronger than before. Their wars were not mere skirmishes for dominance. They fought total wars, wars where entire continents became battlefields, where innovation in destruction outpaced any reason for peace. The terrifying part was not that these wars happened, but that they survived them. Species across the stars know of battles measured in thousands, sometimes millions. Humanity measured its conflicts in tens of millions, then hundreds of millions, until numbers lost all meaning. Yet somehow, after every near annihilation, they rebuilt. They did not vanish into obscurity. They did not learn fear as others did. They learned resilience. They learned to rise faster than they had fallen. When hunger pressed against them, they reshaped the land. When the land resisted, they turned to the seas. When seas failed, they looked upward and dared to take the sky. And when the sky was no longer enough, they reached into space itself with machines that had no business working, fragile constructs of metal and willpower that other species dismissed as impossible. And yet they worked. Humanity had no natural place among the stars, but they made one. That audacity defined them. To other civilizations, war is calamity, a sign of failure. To humans, conflict became a crucible. They refined themselves through struggle, always preparing for the next. Even in peace, their minds bent toward what might come, and they poured ingenuity into machines and ideas to face it. They made weapons not because they always intended to fight, but because they understood something fundamental: safety is never guaranteed. Where others sought the illusion of eternal stability, humans prepared for instability as certainty. That awareness made them dangerous. Their creativity is not bound by logic as most species define it. They leap where others calculate. They improvise where others freeze. They gamble when failure seems inevitable, and too often, the gamble succeeds. Their history is littered with victories snatched from situations no other people would attempt. In the cold mathematics of strategy, they should have been destroyed many times. Instead, each near catastrophe became another lesson etched into their collective memory. Perhaps most confounding of all, their brutality is matched by compassion. They are capable of cruelty on scales that shock even hardened empires, yet they are also capable of sacrifice, mercy, and selflessness in ways equally incomprehensible. They will risk their lives for strangers, yet raise entire cities without hesitation if survival demands it. They carry contradiction within them, and that contradiction makes them unreadable. Allies find inspiration in them, enemies discover terror. It is this duality that unsettles those who truly study them. They are not the strongest, nor the most advanced, nor the most numerous. But they are the most unpredictable. Their capacity to destroy is equaled by their capacity to endure, and both are bound together by a relentless drive to keep moving forward. Other species fight until they cannot, then surrender or perish. Humans fight until they win, or until nothing is left standing at all. When the alien general warned the council, it was not superstition or paranoia. It was the memory of this history distilled into a single truth: humanity has never known neutrality when survival is threatened. They may stand aside when unprovoked, but if forced, they transform into something war itself cannot easily consume. To dismiss them as primitive is to misunderstand their entire existence. They are not defined by their present strength, but by the centuries of scars that shaped them into survivors. In the galaxy, survival is rare. Prosperity is rarer still. But to combine survival, prosperity, and relentless adaptability, that is almost unheard of. And yet humanity, with all its flaws, embodies it. They are the species that should have broken long ago, yet they did not. Every era of devastation only sharpened them. The more they lost, the more dangerous they became. That is their forgotten history, the legacy invisible to empires too arrogant to look closely. The general's warning, then, was not born of fear but of recognition. For he understood that a race born from constant trial carries a weapon no empire can match: the certainty that no matter how fierce the storm, humanity will find a way through it. And if they cannot find one, they will carve one, no matter the cost. The council chamber resounded not with caution, but with derision. The old general's warning was set aside like the ramblings of one who had outlived his relevance. To the rulers of the Galactic Empire, humanity was a footnote in a galaxy filled with titanic civilizations. They saw Earth as a minor world clinging to outdated weapons, its colonies scattered and vulnerable. They calculated in fleets, in resource tonnage, in technological indices, and in every one of those measures, humans appeared insignificant. Arrogance was the Empire's lifeblood. They had subjugated races that once dwarfed their own numbers, bent entire clusters into their order, and crushed rebellions with weapons that burned worlds clean. To them, another species refusing obedience was an inconvenience, not a danger. And so, when the general spoke of resilience and unpredictability, they heard only weakness dressed as myth. The younger counselors were particularly bold in their disdain. To them, war was abstract, measured in lines on star charts and records in data vaults. They had never stood on a battlefield or tasted defeat. They spoke of humanity as a prize, a resource waiting to be claimed. Their bodies adapt quickly, one declared. They would make excellent soldiers, another chimed in. Their industry could serve our fleets. Their creativity, directed under discipline, would strengthen us. The idea spread quickly that humans need not remain neutral, but should be folded into the Empire's designs, whether willingly or by force. The older statesman nodded, not out of conviction but out of calculation. The Empire thrived on control, and a neutral power in the middle of a galactic conflict was an insult to their dominance. To them, neutrality was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. It was better to bring humanity into their order than risk the embarrassment of a small world standing apart from their grand struggle. The general pressed his case one final time. He spoke of enemies underestimated in the past, small coalitions that had seemed insignificant until their defiance drew blood. He described campaigns where overconfidence turned victory into catastrophe. But his words met only silence, then contempt. "Your fears are relics," one counselor said coldly. "This is not the age of desperate wars. This is the age of our empire's supremacy. If humans resist, they will be taught obedience as countless others have been." And with that, the decision was sealed. Humanity would not be left alone. The Empire would send envoys, backed by warships, to demand cooperation. If humanity declined, force would be applied. The general bowed his head, knowing that the course was set, knowing also that the council did not truly hear him. They were too blinded by the numbers on their ledgers, by the fleets at their command, to imagine that those numbers might mean nothing against an enemy who fought differently. Behind their decision lay a simple conviction: power decides destiny. The Empire had the fleets, the armies, the resources, therefore they believed the outcome was already written. They mistook dominance for inevitability. They did not understand that humanity's strength was not written in statistics but in spirit, a quality invisible to empires who weighed worth only in material terms. Among the high tiers of the chamber, a few advisors whispered uneasily. They had read fragments of human history and knew the stories of wars fought with terrifying ferocity. But they did not raise their voices. In the Empire, dissent was dangerous, and the momentum of arrogance was unstoppable. The final decree was spoken with confidence: humanity would be compelled to join the Empire's war effort. Their neutrality was a luxury the Council would not allow. The order was delivered not with fear, but with certainty, as though the outcome were already secured. The general left the chamber without protest. His silence was not surrender but resignation. He had seen this pattern before, in countless civilizations who mistook control for wisdom. He knew that once the Council set its path, only reality itself could correct them. And reality, he feared, would come in fire. Far above, the star map continued to shimmer, Earth a small dot among countless lights. To the Empire, it was an afterthought, an acquisition waiting to be processed. To the general, it was a warning unheeded, a spark that could ignite more than the Council dared to imagine. The Council celebrated their choice as a step toward greater power. They did not realize that what they had chosen was not conquest but the opening of a wound that could never be closed. For by deciding to deny humanity neutrality, they had ensured that humanity would be forced to decide something else entirely, whether to endure quietly, or to resist with everything they possessed. And the general knew which path they would take. The first approach came under the guise of diplomacy, though the truth was clear to anyone who understood the Empire's methods. They did not send envoys without warships, and they did not request cooperation without threats hovering in orbit. Earth was presented with demands cloaked in polite language: pledge allegiance to the Empire, supply resources and soldiers, and allow imperial oversight of colonies. In exchange, the Empire promised protection, trade, and status within their hierarchy. It was the kind of offer that left no room for refusal. Humanity declined. The words were simple and direct: they would not take part in the war, and they would not submit. The refusal was not shouted but spoken calmly, a statement of principle rather than defiance. To the Empire, such a response was insolence. To humanity, it was the only answer possible. The Empire reacted as it always did, with force. Their warships established blockades around human colonies, seizing supplies and restricting trade. They struck at outposts to demonstrate dominance, convinced that fear would bring quick compliance. It had worked on countless other species. They expected humans to fold. Instead, something unexpected happened. The attacks did not cow humanity, they provoked it. Within weeks, Imperial ships began suffering losses that no strategist could explain. Civilian freighters, supposedly helpless, rammed military vessels with suicidal precision. Mining platforms, thought useless in battle, turned their industrial tools into weapons capable of tearing through armor. Communication relays were hijacked, turning the Empire's own networks into traps. What should have been a simple show of strength turned into a campaign of frustration. Humans did not fight as the Empire anticipated. They refused to meet strength with strength. They avoided open battles where their inferiority would be clear. Instead, they struck in shadows, using knowledge of terrain, improvisation, and sheer audacity. A single human corvette might cripple a battleship not through superior firepower but through reckless tactics no Empire commander would dare attempt. Where the Empire measured risk, humans embraced it, and their victories multiplied in places where logic said none should exist. Adaptation became their most frightening weapon. Each time the Empire developed a countermeasure, humans found a new method of attack. They learned the weaknesses of enemy shields, exploited blind spots and sensor arrays, and even turned captured Imperial technology back against its makers. They fought not to dominate but to survive, and survival gave them an intensity that statistics could not measure. Psychological warfare emerged as another tool. Stories spread among Imperial crews of human ambushes, of silent ships drifting until they struck without warning, of soldiers who refused to die quietly. Fear began to spread in the Empire's ranks, not because humans were stronger, but because they were unpredictable. Every encounter carried the possibility of disaster. What should have been a minor policing action became a slow drain of morale and resources. The old general watched the reports arrive with grim inevitability. The very patterns he had warned of unfolded before his eyes. Each failed attempt to break human resolve only hardened it further. Each skirmish taught humanity something new, and they adapted with terrifying speed. What had begun as scattered resistance grew into coordinated defiance, and colonies once seen as liabilities became strongholds. The council raged at the setbacks, blaming commanders, blaming luck, never admitting the truth. They had awakened a people who could not be intimidated. Every blow meant to enforce submission only deepened resistance. Humanity was no longer standing aside from the war. They were shaping it, bending it to their own rhythm, dragging the Empire into a kind of struggle it was ill-prepared to fight. The Empire's fleets still dwarfed anything humanity could field. Their weapons were more advanced, their resources vast. But raw strength meant little against an enemy who turned weakness into strategy. The Empire had built its dominance on predictable wars fought with predictable rules. Humanity shattered those rules with every reckless strike, every improvised weapon, every refusal to yield. In the halls of power, the Council dismissed these early battles as annoyances. In the barracks and shipyards, the story was different. Veterans began whispering of an enemy who could not be cornered, who always found a way to turn defeat into opportunity. Commanders spoke in hushed tones about the humans' refusal to calculate odds the way other species did. What terrified them most was not that humans resisted, but that they seemed to grow stronger the more desperate the fight became. The general's prophecy was being fulfilled in real time. Humanity had been forced to choose, and they had chosen defiance. They had no empire, no vast fleets, no advanced technology to rival the galactic powers. But they had something more dangerous, the will to fight without limits, and the audacity to act where others hesitated. In the fire of their first true galactic war, they proved the truth of the warning that had been ignored. They would not be broken. The conflict escalated far beyond what the Empire had envisioned. What began as raids and scattered defiance transformed into organized campaigns. Human colonies that were once vulnerable outposts became bastions of resistance, each strike coordinated with growing sophistication. They did not merely fight defensively, they began to take the war outward, striking at supply chains, shipyards, and command hubs. Every loss the Empire inflicted seemed to spark two new acts of retaliation. Imperial commanders found themselves trapped in a cycle they could not control. Crushing victories on paper dissolved into defeats once the broader consequences appeared. Destroying a human fleet accomplished nothing when survivors returned with new tactics. Occupying a colony only created insurgencies that bled resources dry. Each attempt to demonstrate superiority only exposed fresh vulnerabilities. The Empire was accustomed to opponents who broke under overwhelming force. Humanity absorbed it, and returned the blow with interest. The general's prediction unfolded step by step. Humanity was no longer a neutral species on the edge of empire. They had become the central catalyst of the war. Other subjugated peoples, long resigned to imperial dominance, began to watch with renewed courage. They saw in humans not merely rebels, but proof that the Empire was not invincible. Whispers spread across star systems: if humans could resist, then so could others. Soon small revolts ignited, not because humanity had asked for allies, but because their defiance inspired them. The Council tried to stamp out these sparks, but every attempt pulled resources further from the core struggle. Fleets that should have secured dominance were stretched thin across rebellions. Commanders who once boasted of swift victories now spoke with caution, wary of traps that seemed to spring from nowhere. Fear crept into their ranks. The Empire was bleeding, not from a single decisive battle, but from 1,000 cuts delivered by an enemy who refused to obey the rules of war. For the humans, the conflict was not about conquest. They never sought to topple the Empire for glory or dominion. Their aim was survival, and in pursuing it with relentless determination, they achieved what no other species had dared. They shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. They forced a civilization that prided itself on control into chaos. They reminded every world that no empire, however vast, was unassailable. In private, the general observed with sorrow rather than triumph. His warnings had been mocked, yet they had proven true in every detail. Humanity had been given no choice but to fight, and in fighting, they had become a force that could not be contained. The war no longer belonged to the Empire's council, it now revolved around humanity's will. He recognized the tragedy as much as the inevitability. The galaxy could have known peace had arrogance allowed neutrality. Instead, the arrogance had forged a new center of power, one built on defiance. Imperial leaders still clung to the belief that overwhelming numbers would restore order. But numbers meant little against a species that refused surrender. Battles that should have ended in decisive victories dragged into endless wars of attrition. The Empire's strength, once projected as unshakable, revealed itself as brittle when stretched against humanity's endurance. They could burn planets, but they could not extinguish will. The legacy of the warning became undeniable. Humanity had reshaped the war simply by surviving it. They had turned resistance into inspiration, desperation into advantage, and isolation into leadership. In every corner of the galaxy, the lesson spread: never mistake humanity's desire for peace as weakness. They sought no empire of their own, but if denied the right to stand apart, they would stand against, and in doing so, alter the course of civilizations. The council that had laughed at the old general's words now sat fractured, its unity broken by the endless strain. Some argued for renewed offensives, others for retreat, but none could agree on how to reclaim the control they had once believed absolute. Their power was eroding, not through conquest, but through defiance they had failed to prevent. And so the war's final truth emerged, clear to all who witnessed it: humanity had never wanted dominance, only the right to choose their own path. But when forced into struggle, they revealed a strength no empire had anticipated. They were not the largest, the most advanced, or the most numerous. They were something rarer, a people who would never stop until their will was fulfilled. The general's final reflection echoed across the fading empire. It was not humanity's weapons that made them dangerous, but their resolve. The empire had feared power, yet it was will they should have feared. Against that, fleets, armies, and centuries of supremacy meant nothing. Empires rise and fall, but humanity endures, and when provoked, humanity does not merely endure. Humanity decides.